Welcome back to the Lipoedema Podcast. We are your hosts, Shell
and Tiana, and today we are joined by special guest, Jonathan Steedman. Hello, Jonathan. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, team. Thank you so much for having me.
It is so exciting because Jono is my dietitian, so I'm feeling very privileged to have Jono in the hot seat today. So, Jono, I want to get started because, I've lived my life on fad diet. And so I really wanted to speak first into, when we make that decision to ditch fad diet and, lean into sustainable nutrition, how does a dietitian help with that?
I think holding you accountable to that decision, because fad diets are very appealing. They're very well marketed. They're very sexy. I get it. And so I think sometimes it can help remind you of oh, hey, don't go down that path again. You know what's going to happen. I think as well, oftentimes, I think we struggle to find the messy middle. We're either hard fad dieting or we're just don't even know what to eat. You know, we're confused about what is going to work for me, what's going to make me feel good, when I say the right decisions, I don't mean in terms of good or bad foods, but things that are going to make me feel good and give me good energy and set me up and all that sort of stuff. So I think that there's probably a number of different ways depending on people's past, but predominantly my role seems to be a little bit of, no, come back. Don't do that. Don't read that book. Don't do that thing, and then also, I guess presenting that other way of, hey, here's how you can, all foods can fit. Here's how you can still kind of feel good, achieve the things that you're trying to achieve without cutting sugar or insert food here,
Yes, I think that's the biggest thing, because whenever I'm I'll just cut that out for a while, well, that just triggers everything in my brain to go, no, yeah. And then I just go down this awful slippery slope of, well, let's try the next fad. Let's try, that worked for them. Let's try that. Let's do that. And I forget that the basics, if I hit the basics, then I'm going to feel better. I'm going to have more energy. Yeah.
They're just not exciting. I get it. Like I said, compared to, I don't know, keto or some kind of paleo where, there's all these sort of arbitrary rules. I think it sounds more like it's going to help more, which unfortunately, as we know, you'll get that short-term rush or that short-term win, but long-term, it's not going to get you to where you want to go.
And we'd like things to fit into a box and have a title and be defined. But really, when we're talking about healthy eating in our life, it can look so many different ways at so many different times, especially for us women. How do you, as a dietitian, navigate through from our perspective when we have those hormonal fluctuations and we do need things at different times, but we don't quite know what that is?
Yeah, well, I think the big thing is there's actually still no firm recommendation around. So for example, the menstrual cycle, everyone's experience is quite unique. There's certainly, I just realized how obvious that statement was, sorry. But I guess what I'm getting at, you'll see things like, oh, in this phase, you need more of this. And in this phase, you should do this. And it's just that's actually not evidence-based at the moment. Scientifically, we know that people do need different things, but we can't give these broad recommendations around. Everyone should do this in this phase and everyone needs this nutrient at this phase and things like that. So what I would encourage people to do more than anything is pay attention, because it's so easy to not pay attention because we're constantly getting pulled in so many different directions. But for you to understand what your experience is throughout your menstrual cycle when it comes to, obviously I'm mostly talking about food and nutrition and things like that, but from energy levels, from appetite, from symptoms and all of those sorts of things, and start to build a bit of your plan as to how to do that. And I find for most of my clients, they do eat a little bit differently at different times in the cycle. We'll add a little bit more food in here or add an extra snack, or we'll increase certain foods. And I think I would say most people would benefit from having a backup plan or a fallback plan, if you will. But it's going to look a little bit different for everyone based on kind of their experience there. In terms of, I guess, other big hormonal shifts like later in life with perimenopause, we can be a lot more specific with nutritional recommendations there, because there are some things that are pretty much a good idea for everybody. But even then, that's another area that, that's a whole other rabbit hole that is rife with misinformation. I feel like a lot of people seem to get told as soon as they hit perimenopause that it's almost like you're no longer human. All the things that worked for you as a human don't work anymore. You're just a new being. And obviously there are changes,
a new being
there are
with
shifts.
a big belly,
but
it's what we're hearing. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. And there's nothing you can do about it. And it's your fault, or like all of these kind of horrible messages which aren't
Stop
helpful.
cardio. Stop cardio.
Yeah.
Stop cardio.
Again, if someone gives you a black or white, do this, that's your first red flag. Because unfortunately, I mean, that would make my job really easy if I could just be like, everybody needs to eat like this, go to that. That's just not how humans work. So,
Yeah.
It can be really hard because, well, it's great that we've got all this information at our fingertips, but there's so much misinformation as well. So that makes it so tricky. And especially because even if it's from, like, generally for me, it's always been a weight loss thing. I've always wanted weight loss. But if you want more energy, you want whatever you're looking for, you want that magic pill, don't you? You want that magic thing. So you're always on the lookout. And it's going to be really hard to have a bullshit detector to say, no, let's not do that one.
yeah. And because they're getting, there's some that are quite obviously like garbage. Then there's a lot of really sneaky ones that start with a pearl of truth, so it's not like it's completely outside the realms of possibility or completely irrational. So, then you start to question, oh, maybe that is right. And then, we have this horrible, like authority bias as well. So when like a doctor or a fit, good looking person or someone, when they endorse something, because doctors are smart predominantly, I imagine, then if they're endorsing this diet, it must be right. And it's sort of, well, actually, that's not their wheelhouse, so we get this horrible mix of, I think that's the dangerous misinformation online. It's the stuff that's got a pearl of truth, but then has been extrapolated well beyond where it should, or the approaches that have been kind of, endorsed by someone who has authority and skills in a different area. But unfortunately, we just kind of give them credibility in all areas.
I love how you mentioned that, if doctors endorse information, it's not in their wheelhouse. And you're so right. Like in medical school, the amount of nutritional education that they receive is like,
it's wild. It's like 3 hours or something. Yeah.
Minimal. So that's why we need people like you to help us.
Yeah. Well, and I don't mean that. I think when I say that, people are like, you're anti-doctor. Absolutely not. The amount of stuff they have to know to be like, an expert in their field is wild. It's not fair to expect them to be also an expert in nutrition. And that's why, teamwork makes the dream work. It's that, unfortunately, I think some doctors just think, oh, I know a lot about the body. I eat. I know everything I need to know about nutrition. It's like, oh, maybe not.
Yeah, it's definitely multifaceted, isn't it? We need a whole team of people to give us the information and the guidance that we need to care for ourselves.
Absolutely.
So let's talk a little about nutrients, Jono. What nutrients are we looking for to create a balanced meal?
So proteins, carbs, fats, fiber, they're our big four kind of macronutrients. I don't think fiber is technically a macronutrient, but anyway, they're called macro because we need them in big amounts, and they're also big things. Now, I don't overly like talking about protein because you don't eat protein, you eat a food that contains protein. And I know that sounds pedantic, but it's important. But I still will, I think we all do default into like, chicken breast, that's protein, it has protein. But anyhow, making sure that you have foods providing you with all of those macronutrients as often as possible. Like not every single meal and snack in your life needs to be balanced. Sometimes you do just need a good pasta and you don't want to add a good source of protein to it, and that's fine, right? But if we're looking at what our regular meals are going to look like on a daily basis, ideally something that's got a good source of protein, whether that be, lean meats, fish, poultry, eggs, tofu, dairy. I always leave foods out when I try and list things like that, but something like that. And then, we ideally want some form of carbohydrate on the plate, giving us energy, filling us up, making us feel good. So we're looking at, rice, potato, pasta, bread, fruit, those sorts of things. Ideally as well, a good hit of what we call non-starchy vegetables. So basically anything that's not a potato, because again, that helps fill us up. They contain lots of, vitamins, minerals, fiber, all of those good things. And then you can be a bit intentional with fats, but sometimes those other foods I mentioned will also provide a source of fat. So, if you've opted for eggs or salmon, for example, that's going to be quite a good hit of fat at that meal as well. But if you can build a plate that sort of looks like that, and I know that it's easier said than done a lot of the time, but if we can start with that as our goal, that's a meal that's going to give you, sounds overly simplistic, but we can then extrapolate that out to go, you're probably getting enough protein to support bone health, muscle growth, energy levels, blood sugar levels. You're probably getting enough fat to support hormone production and fat-soluble vitamin absorption. You're probably getting enough fiber to support gut health and, again, manage blood sugar levels. You're probably getting enough vitamins A, B, C, D, E, K from all of it. Like, there is a layer underneath a balanced meal that is actually, it ticks lots of extra boxes. And so I'd say that's one of the big mistakes I see is people not balancing their meals, whether that's because they don't know how or because logistically it can be tricky. And I would say probably the piece of the puzzle that's most often missing is the protein component. Because protein foods are harder to prepare. They pretty much all of them require some level of preparation. They're generally not shelf stable. Like, they are just the tricky ones. But unfortunately, they're also the
most important.
Yeah, they're the really helpful ones. So trying to, it's why I talk about protein a lot, not because it's the only thing people should be worried about, but it's because I find that's the box we're probably the least likely to be ticking.
I mean, you
absolutely.
can chop up a whole bunch of vegetables and not cook them and just snack on them all day, but it's not going to meet your requirements. Whereas you have to actually cook the chicken or cook the salmon, or unless you get it from a can, and not everything comes in a can, or not everything is edible that comes in a can or tastes nice that comes in a can.
Canned chicken? That's the one for me. That's the line.
That's terrible. I tried that. That was awful.
Concept, really good.
Yeah, great, really practical. I can't do it.
It was awful. Yeah.
Cannot do that. And I like having that balanced meal. Like, so I even know sometimes if I'm in a hurry and, I miss something that's not really balanced, I'll be after something afterwards.
Yeah.
Whereas if I've had my balanced meal, I'm satisfied. My body's got what it needs. I've got the energy. I've got everything. And so it's really, I find for me, it's really important to make sure that I have, protein, carb, veggies at each meal, or fruit. Yeah. And that makes a huge difference.
Yeah, it can really set you up later in the day. And often what I find is the thing people are struggling with or trying to solve, I've got a sweet tooth, I'm overeating these foods, I want to eat less of these foods, or I'm finding that I'm snacking before dinner and I can't stop. Like, all of those things, they're actually more symptoms of earlier in the day you didn't eat enough. You didn't eat meals that were balanced enough, but we're so focused on, how do I snack less at dinner? Or how do I stop eating a block of chocolate every night and all these things? And it's like, honestly, don't worry about those. Like, focus on eating enough at breakfast, lunch, and dinner, because that's the other thing. You could be balanced but tiny. So like 2 rice cakes and some tuna and tomato is balanced, but is not enough for a meal for almost everybody. So, but if you're eating enough and you're balanced, oftentimes all of those other things that you were worried about, like, they just kind of fade away, and you have chocolate, but you don't feel the need to eat the whole block, and you have a snack before dinner, but you have an off switch,
Totally. Thought, Shell was saying if she doesn't have a balanced meal, she really gets, snacky afterwards. And I can honestly say if I don't front load with protein or have enough protein in my diet, I'm looking for the chocolate, I'm looking for the chips, I'm looking for things to snack on. And if I supplement with protein, and I know it's not whole food, but I do find that I'm not snacking all day, and it helps those symptoms. Like you said, it's a symptom. It's not the cause of,
Yeah. Again, protein, I feel like such a gym bro every time I focus on it, but it's because it does solve a lot of problems for a lot of people. Yeah.
What are some tips for like incorporating balanced food, like when you're really busy? Like, what are some quick go-to things for people who really are time poor and they just want to make a few easy changes?
Yeah. So you'd know this, Shell, because I've thrown so many of them at you. I'm a huge fan of packaged food. Because I think it cops a bad rap. It's the same as this whole ultra processed food conversation that we're having at the moment. That is way too broad of a definition or bucket to put food in, because you're trying to tell me that a packet of steam fresh veggies and a packet of corn chips are both packet food. Like, I think we can be a bit smarter than that. And so we're super lucky in this day and age. We have access to tons of really great, really healthy, really kind of quickly prepared or quickly preparable options. You're like, do I wish I could spend 2 hours cooking dinner every night? Yes, I do. I love cooking, but like, that's just, making my own butter from scratch, all of those wonderful things. yeah, that'd be great, but that's just not going to happen. I love people having some really good freezer and pantry staple options on hand. So trying to make sure that you've got, 2 or 3 different frozen protein options, whether that be, like all of the frozen salmon or a frozen prawn, or there's some amazing crumbed chicken options, which I know everyone hears, oh, crumbed chicken, isn't that bad? And it's sort of, well, what would you eat instead of that? It's like, oh, I'd probably get Macca's on the way home. It's like all of a sudden that frozen crumb chicken from Woolies isn't looking too bad, is it? Especially if I can then pair it with a steam fresh thing of potato and veggies, and all of a sudden I've got this bowl of, a steam air fried piece of salmon, some steam fresh potatoes, and then a tin of chickpeas that I've gotten from the pantry that I put together in probably close to 6 minutes. That every single thing's come from a packet, but it's loaded with protein and healthy fats and fibers and things like that. So without running through a giant list of all of my favorite products, because that would not be a great listening experience, I know. But that would be honestly my main tip is like, don't fear that stuff. There are some really amazing options. And then I think probably the next tip is coming back to that crumb chicken example. Don't look for perfect, because that's going to hurt you more than it's going to help you, because you're going to find all of the reasons why I shouldn't eat this is bad. And then that's ultimately going to result in you probably making a choice that's way less nutrient dense than if you just had the crumbed chicken and the packaged potatoes.
Yeah, it's like, oh, this is all too hard. I'm going to go through the drive-through and get GYG.
100%. Yeah. So but that's just humans, right? Where we can be silly at times, and we get too black and white in the moment, and then we, go, oh, I'm very all or nothing, as I hear a lot of people say. It's a common mental mistake that we make, and that's I feel like how we can see that in food is like, oh, that's not perfect, I can't eat that, so I'm just going to go as hard as I possibly can in the other direction.
Yeah, I'm going to go a bit off script here, Jonathan, because you're saying some people are very all or nothing. And I find that that's most prominent in like the sugar, no sugar camp. It's like if you have a little bit of sugar, you're just craving sugar all the time. What say you about having that mindset where you can have a treat and the treat doesn't turn into a big blowout? Like how does one do that?
Yeah. There's a couple of different layers to it. The first is the balanced meals and the eating enough, right? Because our bodies we know sugar, like sweet and salt and fat, are like the 3 things that we're hardwired to seek out, because that means energy, right? So that's why if you're starving, you probably don't feel like a tomato. It's like, oh, a tomato or a Kit Kat or a packet of chips. Like I'm going to go for those ones because we just know innately that they're more energy. So first and foremost, I think that's the critical thing is make sure you're eating enough and that those meals are balanced. Because if you're trying to moderate your chocolate intake and you're hungry, like good luck. Yeah, that's just not fair to even ask yourself to be able to do that, right? So eat regularly, eat balanced, do all those sorts of things. Then there's the whole permission conversation, right? Giving yourself permission to eat all the foods. Maybe not all of the food, but every food. Like there's permission for everything, because the second you start putting restriction around that, there's something called the Last Supper effect, which we've probably all experienced when we said, all right, I'm not having chocolate for 4 weeks. Like I'm gonna cut that for 4 weeks, or sugar or what have you. What do you do the night before? Like, right? And then because inevitably 4 weeks without chocolate is miserable, so you get a week in and then you snap and then you do that again. And so, we can do that sort of cycle. There is permission to be like, I can't give you permission to eat chocolate. Like I can't be your dietitian and say like, you're allowed. You have to give yourself permission to eat the chocolate. You have to give yourself a bit of, I guess, like allowance for your intake of that chocolate to be a bit wobbly at first, and to accept that there will be times where you do overeat it and afterwards you are a bit disappointed in the amount that you ate. But if you don't allow yourself to suffer for a while, you're not going to ever get to that stage where you can actually include those foods in a way that's a lot healthier, more mentally than physically, but like, healthier, more balanced. And so those are the 2, like it's unfortunately, again, I wish I had a quick black or white answer for you, but it is definitely don't be hungry, but also like permission. And then there's the eat it slowly, eat it mindfully, trying to make sure that you're actually enjoying it rather than just sort of mindlessly sitting on the couch, shoveling down Maltesers, not paying attention. So they're probably the three places I would start. And don't cut sugar. Yeah, please don't ever cut sugar. It's never It's never the
It's been my goal for so many years and I've failed so many times, and it's just, yeah.
We're just in too many things apart from anything else. And similar to the thing before, right? Like we're saying that punnet strawberries and like an ice cream, they both have sugar in them. So I got to cut both of them. It's like, well, hold on a second. Like the overall, there's a lot more going on in that food as a whole than just its sugar content.
I think that there should be a place for everything. And there is a place for everything. It's all that all or nothing thinking, that black and white thinking, that you can't be healthy if you eat chocolate and things like that. But that's not true. We can, the way we eat the chocolate is how we can be healthy. Like we had our family Christmas and I got a plate and I got a little bit of everything I wanted to try. And that was perfect. And I enjoyed it. And I didn't feel like shit afterwards from overeating or any guilt. I just enjoyed it with my family. And getting into that mindset has been the biggest thing for me. And it's just,
awesome.
it infiltrates into everything then.
Can I also
same with
just
exercise, like I'm not killing myself like, oh, I didn't go to the gym today or I didn't do this. It's like, hang on a minute. Just, have some grace, like treat yourself beautifully and Sorry, Tiana, I cut you off.
No, all good. I was just going to add, for those of us with lipedema that do have consequences to our actions of food, if we are going to choose to make those decisions that are a bit more flexible for our mental health, we then also have to accept what our body does afterwards with love and grace. So, I'm deciding to have that piece of cheesecake for a birthday that I'm attending. And I might be a little bit more inflamed tomorrow or straight away. Or for the next few days, I might feel a bit uncomfortable with the pain in my legs. And that's just something that we might need to accept in our specific community. And I guess it's like a physical reminder to us that these things have an effect. So there is cause and effect with us. And so next time we might choose something different. If it's not a birthday, we won't have the cheesecake. We won't just go to the shops and buy a random cheesecake on one day. It's like eat mindfully when you can and then enjoy your treats, but know that it has a corresponding issue, whatever that may be for you.
Well, something I talk about a lot in like with choices with nutrition is the intent is much more important than the actual choice. So for someone, the choice to not have that cheesecake because you're like, I know how this is going to make me feel and I actually don't want to choose that, versus someone who's choosing not to have the cheesecake because it's bad and it's full of sugar and it's unhealthy, right? That both of those, like that's the same decision, but the intent behind it is so different. And so I think that's why we can't just sit here and say, eat what you want. Like, it's fine. It's like, hang on. Well, for some people, that's actually not going to make them, that's not going to align with their values. They're not going to feel that way. But for other people, they're going to be overly restricting because of this sort of fear of food. So that would be the thing I'd always encourage people to look at is like your why, start with why. And we're not necessarily doing the Simon Sinek thing, but there is that in that choice. It's like, why am I making this choice? And is it for a positive reason? And so I absolutely think there could be time where you would say, no, thanks. I don't want that cheesecake. I don't want that chocolate because actually I know how it's going to make me feel and it's not worth it. Whereas there's maybe other times where it's totally worth it.
That's such a great point, because I feel like a lot of us restrict ourselves in the pursuit of smallness and thinness, and that's such toxic mindset to go through. Whereas when we're choosing to not have something or to have something because we want to avoid feeling terrible, that's completely different energy, right?
100%. Yeah.
And you did just mention there, I can't remember who said it, but about food fear. And I didn't realize how much food fear I had until I started working with Jono and I decided to have baked beans on toast for breakfast. And oh my goodness.
That gets a lot of people. Yeah. You're not alone.
That's a nice winter breakfast, that is.
It was such a push, but it was so delicious. Crazy.
So good. But isn't there sugar in the tomato sauce? It's like, oh yeah, but there's also a ton of fiber and this is not picking on you. This is like the amount of times baked beans seem to be this food where, wait, baked beans are good? It's like, well, again, don't love talking about food in that terms. Yeah, baked beans are actually quite nutritious, but they've definitely suffered from, or they're pretty high carb, or they've got sugar in the tomato sauce, or they're in a tin, from all of that messaging that we've just been like hammered with over the years. But anyway, yeah, well, let's not, I could talk about baked beans for a while, but they're great.
Excellent. Baked beans, yes.
Yes.
And they're in a tin, even better.
Yeah.
Shelf
so
stable.
Convenient. Yes, love that. So accessible for your morning.
Great dinner as well, by the way. It doesn't just have to be breakfast. If you're stuck, A Brinner, breakfast for dinner, is one of my favorites. And again, like piece of toast in the toaster, that maybe you throw some spinach on or some mushrooms or something. But even if you can't do that, like you've still got a pretty good dinner in like 3 minutes, 2 minutes.
So good. Okay, so ideally we want to be in this really comfortable place with our food and know what we need and what we want, what's good for our mental health and physical health for the rest of our lives. How do we stay motivated to maintain this healthy way of life long term?
Look, if I had a 100% perfect answer for this question, I'd be speaking to you from my yacht in the Bahamas, because like this kind of it, right? This is like this is the issue, because like oftentimes we'll hear, but so I think there's a whole heap of different reasons why someone might fall off from what they've been doing, right? And I do think a lot of the time the reason is because what they thought was sustainable actually isn't as sustainable as it could be, right? So that's the first thing. We have to really make sure that you are doing something that is healthy but doable, aligns with your goals, your values, your lifestyle, your likes, dislikes, your family, all of these sorts of things, right? So if you've got that, I'd say the next thing is like I think we all have this thought that when I make a positive change with my health and my nutrition, that then it's like a light switch. It's either on or it's off, and it needs to stay on at all times. And the reality is that's not the case. Like we need to think of it more like a dimmer. And so it's you made all these positive changes, but you should also be allowed to relax on some of them at different times. Not even intentionally, just that's naturally what's going to happen. Things are seasonal. We're going to have ebb and flow. You're going to have times in the year where you move more, and there's going to be times in the year where you move less. There's going to be times where you eat more fruits and vegetables, and times where you eat less fruits and vegetables and things like that. And I think if we just gave ourselves that space, we'd actually sustain it for much longer, because you don't have this last few weeks I've only gone for a walk 3 times. I guess I failed at that now, right? Rather than like even just recognizing that, going, yeah, I have walked a bit less lately. Let's just try and walk a bit more next week, right? Let's dial that back in. So that would be one big thing I would say, is being a little bit kinder to yourself. Probably the theme of a lot of my conversations, but and accepting that you're not a robot. So you are going to ebb and flow, and just accepting that as natural and normal, and not letting that kind of not catastrophizing that and letting yourself spiral. I think the other thing as well is, you need to have, coming back to that why, you need to have a good reason for why you've made those changes, and it probably needs to be more than I want to be smaller, right?
Yeah.
I'm not opposed to people losing body weight at all. I'm pro body autonomy, like all that kind of stuff. Again, coming back to that question of intent, that's the reason. Like, why do you want to lose weight? Because there's lots of perfectly valid reasons. And who am I to say what's valid or not? But you know what I mean? There's lots of perfectly positive reasons to want to lose body weight. There's also a ton of very negative reasons to want to lose body weight. And I think if you've made any changes to your health and nutrition from a scarcity or negativity, or, from that space, they're the ones that I would be nervous about being maintained, because it's always going to be an uphill battle. And the second life gets crazy, or the kids get sick, or the dog gets sick, or your car breaks down, like they're going to be the things that fall apart first. So I think it's one, make sure that the thing you're trying to sustain is actually sensible. I can just sustain keto for the rest of my life. That's, can you? Yeah. So I don't believe you. And 2, like, why have you made that change? So make sure, again, you've got a good why, a positive why, a kind why, and then accept that it's not a fixed point of I've made all these changes and now I need to stay this good all the time. I'm going to have a range of being slightly more on and slightly more off. And you want to make sure that you have, there is a break point. Whereas if I go way below that, I haven't had a vegetable for 3 days, then I may be like, let's fix that, but still not be like, oh, yeah, I had Macca's for dinner last night. There were no veggies in that. Well, I guess I'm a failure. Okay, it's time to go back. Yeah, go back to what I was doing.
May as well get Macca's today.
Yeah, right? Well, no, I can't. I'm not allowed to eat now until this afternoon, because I've got compromised, because, by 3 o'clock, I'm going to be so hungry. I'll probably get Macca's again. And sorry, and I don't mean to say that in a teasing manner, because it's such a really easy trap to fall into, right? Of that sort of binge restrict kind of balance. But yes, sorry, to answer your first question, those are the 3 things that I'd be looking at.
Excellent. Now, I assume, being a dietitian, that you are a foodie. Can you please tell us what your go-to meal is?
Man, I think burgers. Like that's why the logo is a burger. And there's just so many different levels of burgers, and I love all of them. I love like a cheeseburger from McDonald's. I love a good homemade or like a fish and chip shop style burger, you know. And then I love like a really wanky blue cheese gourmet something, or like, you know, just all the tiers of burgers are good. So burgers, that's my answer.
Love that. Love burgers. I'm a fan of burgers too, although I seldom make my own burger patties, and they taste so much better when you make them yourself. Like they absolutely do.
Yeah.
It's worth it.
But it's work. Yeah.
It's work.
Yeah. It's the weekend
But then
burger.
I've simplified it. I've simplified it right down, and all I do now, if it's beef, I just put an egg and seasoning. Like, super simple.
So
Whereas
simple.
I used to chuck everything in it. There'd be zucchini and carrot and onion and then all my herbs and spices. But now it's just totally just really basic, and it's delicious.
So good.
And
What a
Peri-Naise.
burger.
I'm
how
loving
good is
Peri-Naise
Peri-Naise?
now.
Goes on everything.
For someone who doesn't usually like spice, once I bought it to try it, I was like, my goodness, my new fave.
It is. That's a, well, I was going to say it's a sleeper. I don't think it is. I think now enough people have tried it and gone, this stuff's amazing.
They're onto it.
Yep.
All right, Jono, we're going to change gears a little bit and move on to inflammation. Now, I am an avid listener of your podcast. You were actually featured on my Spotify Wrap. So
thank you.
Give it
that
a
means
plug,
a lot.
Shell. Give it a plug.
I'll give it a plug. I'll actually put it in the show notes as now. It's Bite Me Nutrition. Amazing. All right, so we're going to get back to it. Acute inflammation. So we need that because that's our body repairing ourselves. Chronic inflammation, and that's what we focus on in the lipedema world because that's what we're dealing with. So in one of your podcast episodes, you spoke about fat being inflammatory, that it can trigger inflammatory processes. So, and you also referred to it as fat as being an organ. Can you explain this a little bit for our listeners?
Yeah, essentially fat it sends chemical signals, right? So that means it's not what we would call inert. Not much is in the human body, to be honest, but it is a little bit more active than we once thought. And so it can send, there's these things called pro-inflammatory cytokines, if you like big words, and body fat can contribute to that. Body fat can also be converting certain hormones, so it can kind of convert testosterone to estrogen, and kind of maybe muck around with the balances there. And a reminder as well that it's not that testosterone is the male hormone and estrogen is the female hormone. It is a balance, and they're important for both, for all of us. So yeah, fat, basically that's where it can get a bit tricky. It can have some chemical signaling that can contribute to those pro-inflammatory markers down the line. Now, that being said, there's so many different things that can, impact inflammation. And I don't, if there's certain areas that you can't control or that you can't impact, the best thing you can do is try and make peace with that and focus on what can, what pro-inflammatory things can I adjust and moderate, right? So yes, that's one of the reasons potentially why someone would focus on losing body fat to help, reduce that inflammation. But it's one piece of the overall puzzle.
Okay. And so anti-inflammatory diet.
What?
Yeah.
We see them everywhere.
Boy, look, and so
what is this mythical creature?
I think I just wish that people added the word patterns after it. That would inflammatory, pro or anti-inflammatory dietary patterns. Because otherwise what happens is then we start calling a food inflammatory or anti-inflammatory, right? And we kind of put them in these camps. That's not entirely unhelpful, because what it is foods that generally get considered anti-inflammatory foods. If we can predominantly have a diet filled with those foods, then that dietary pattern as a whole is probably going to reduce our levels of chronic inflammation, right? But then what happens is people think I'm going to be eating lots of nuts and seeds and healthy fats and fruits and vegetables, but then I had a Mars bar and that's caused all of this inflammation. And it's well, hang on, no. Diets full of Mars bars and low in all of these other foods, yeah, that's probably a pro-inflammatory diet. But you can absolutely have some shock horror, quote unquote, inflammatory foods sprinkled throughout your anti-inflammatory foods, and the average of that diet is still anti-inflammatory. So yes, there's truth to it. Absolutely. It's just that, again, what seems to happen in my industry is we just want to be really black and white about it. It's like, this food is inflammatory, this food is anti-inflammatory. You can only eat anti-inflammatory foods.
It speaks to that good food, bad food rhetoric, which can be really problematic.
Totally. And the thing I don't even know how you would test this in a study. So if anyone smarter than me is listening, it's not hard. But if anyone's really into research and could figure out how to do the study, I would love to know what physical impact the stress of restricting a food has on you compared to the physical impact of just eating the Mars bar, right? Like anyway, conversation for another day, but that's also something to consider, I think.
Well, anecdotally, we all know that that's an impact, don't we?
Totally. Like when we go on holidays and we're so relaxed and we're just eating whatever, like there's a buffet and you're like, yeah, I'm going to have a buffet breakfast. Like, why not? Holiday, have a mojito every now and then. And then you come back and you haven't put on any weight. And you're like, how? It's because you were...
I ate all these bad foods.
Yeah, I ate all these bad foods, but you had a completely different mindset to it.
Yeah.
It was more
so you
relaxed.
probably ate
Stress
less of
levels
them
were
in
down.
a way, though.
Most likely. Yeah, you didn't binge on them because you weren't restricting.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
This in mind.
All right, Jono, we've come to the end, my friend. Before we go, though, have you got anything coming up? How do people get in contact with you? Plug away.
Yeah.
Plug away. All right. Elevator pitch time. No, I should have practiced this. So to get in touch, the place I'm by far the most active is on Instagram. You can just go to Jono Steedman, Jono Steedman. Yeah, I'm way too active there, basically. Also, the website, bitemenutrition.com.au. There's some stuff there. We've got the next round of our group weight loss program, which that phrase makes me sick a little when I say it, but I promise you that this is done different. You know, I say weight loss without the diet culture, essentially, is what we're looking for. There's probably more focused on how to eat, how to structure your day, your plan Bs, how to make this fit in with your life, and how to make this fit long term than there is like, hey, eat this much of this food. We talk about that too, because that's important. But yeah, so the next round of that kicks off on Boxing Day. I can't decide if that was a really good idea or a really terrible idea, but we'll see.
You'll find out.
Yeah, we actually kick off in January, but you can dive in and start getting access to everything in Boxing Day. So again, all of that's going to be on my Instagram as well if you want any more information. Otherwise, yeah, that's where.
Amazing.
That is, and the recipes, everybody. Oh my God, Jono just gives you so many recipes, and I'm an older lass, so I have to print everything. So I'm like constantly printing them out and making my book.
I love seeing hard copies in the wild. It's so great. And some people, not saying that you have to, some people get it bound. It's a whole thing.
Yeah,
it's
you
great.
could have a whole Bite Me Nutrition book, Shell.
Yeah. It's amazing. And so many other things. Jono's constantly popping in and giving us tips on something else. I've loved it. I can't wait to continue. And yeah, been a big game changer for me. I can eat baked beans on toast.
Yes, you can. Yes. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner. That might be a bit much.
Might be a bit farty, Jono.
I was going to say mostly, my family would not appreciate me eating baked beans 3 times a day. That's for sure.
Well, Jono, thank you so much for joining us today. It has been a pleasure.
Yeah.
And,
thank you. Thanks for having me.
No problem. We'll see you again, maybe.
Yeah.
Deal.
Follow-up
Love to.
episode.
Yes.
Awesome. Okay. See you later.
Take care.
Team.
When we started the Lipoedema podcast, we relied on word of mouth and existing connections.
Our following has happened organically, and we are so honoured by your support.
As we learn more about the world of social media and algorithms, we have a request.
When you are listening to our podcast or watching on YouTube, let us know what you think.
Hit follow or subscribe.
Leave us a comment or write a review.
The more engagement we get, the more our message is shared.
And the greater our reach to those women suffering in silence.
Thank you for listening to the Lipoedema podcast. Lipedema and its symptoms vary from individual to individual. The opinions and advice voiced in this podcast are of a personal nature and used for educational purposes.
Please take away from this podcast what resonates with you, and please see your GP or preferred specialist for diagnosis and healthcare. We are Shell and Tiana from the Lipoedema Podcast. Until our next episode, Bye for now.